Okay, guys, it's Right to an Ozarks with Gretchen and Deborah, and today we are coming from Mr. Brian Rohlman's kitchen. Brian, thanks for coming.
Well, thank you for having me.
Brian, tell us a little bit about your background as far as your where you currently work and your involvement in TPUSA, faith, and how you got active in politics.
Yeah, so again, like you guys said, I'm Brian Rohlman. I am a resident of Ozark, and I have a lot of activities that I do trying to get people to be good citizens, right? And really biblically minded citizens. And so I started with Patriot Academy in 2021 as a Patriot Academy coach. And that's kind of where a lot of my local involvement has been centered around. And then in 2023, this is where the TPUSA faith comes into play. With our Patriot Academy classes, we wanted to do a conference. And so we including John Garrity and Tony Petrosino, we organized a Turning Point USA Faith chapter. Really, it's a hub because it's a county level group. So those are called hubs. We organized that so that we could partner with TPUSA Faith and have this conference that we did, which was really helping educate citizens. And we brought special speakers in from around the area and from around the country. But that focus of Turning Point USA Faith, right? That's Charlie Kirk's organization. For those who aren't familiar with that, Turning Point USA with Charlie Kirk. For those who are unfamiliar with why he started the faith wing of the organization, Turning Point USA Faith started in 2020 when he recognized, with all the COVID stuff going on, that there needed to be more of an emphasis on believers being involved in what is going on. He'd started Turning Point USA in 2012, and he'd spent that first 8 years of his organization really focused on the political aspect of things.
Right.
And when COVID happened, and I think it was March of 2020, if I remember the story correctly, he went on his podcast, went on his radio show, and it said, "The churches of America will not stand for this. They will not allow it to be shut down." And within a few weeks, he said, "Wow, that was the biggest mistake I've ever made." Yeah, the worst mistake. He goes, "That was my worst blunder I ever made."
Wow.
But that made him open his eyes and realize that the church at large wasn't involved in what was going on in areas they should be involved in. And so he started Turning Point USA Faith as a way of engaging believers, engaging churches to step up into the realm where they should be.
Well, isn't it your civic duty, regardless of whether you're Christian or Jewish or Muslim or atheist, you have a civic duty to participate in our political system?
Yeah.
And the church has fallen down on the job.
And especially as Christian believers, right? If we look from a biblical perspective, right, we're never told to separate any part of our faith from any area in our life. But for the last really almost 100 years, there was this progressive movement that had entered into the different churches, especially in the U.S., that was putting this idea forward that your spiritual life is separate from your secular life.
Yes.
Right.
Separation of church and state.
Yes, and before we get into the meat of what we're going to talk about, which is the current situation with the Ozark School District vacancies, I think that's a great point that you just mentioned, the siloing of our civic duty with our religious beliefs.
Right.
Well, because our faith is supposed to guide every action that we do. If you're truly biblical in your views, if you're truly following what is taught throughout Scripture, you recognize from the accounts, the historical accounts in the Old Testament, you recognize from the gospel accounts, these people didn't back down no matter what the topic was. They spoke to it from a biblical perspective, right? And in Acts, where we see the church becoming born, right? This church comes into existence because Jesus had said, "Hey, I'm going to create an ecclesia," which is frequently, translated as church. But really that word ecclesia is about a gathering of people who do the business of the organization, right? The ecclesia came from the Greek, which was the people who would come together to direct the affairs of the city or the affairs of the community where they were at. And we see in the book of Acts that word ecclesia is also used where there's the uprising in Ephesus, where, and you may remember that account, where Paul had started the church of Ephesus, and all these believers had come together, and there were some silversmiths and some goldsmiths who said, hey, you're impacting our business because people aren't buying these little idols anymore. They're not buying the little replicas of the temple. They're not doing these things. You're impacting our economic situation. And they got upset. And they went to try to find Paul, but they couldn't find him. They found one of the other church leaders, and they drug him into the forum in Ephesus. And the word ecclesia appears in the Greek there as well, because they said this is an unauthorized ecclesia that has been brought together.
Organization.
So they said, we can't assemble unless we're doing this by the way that we are organized to do. And we have a mob coming together saying that we're doing the business of the city as this mob. And it's like, no, that's not how it's supposed to work. And even the city clerk, if you will, who was supposed to organize the meetings, right? He comes in, he's like, hey, we're going to get called on by the authorities because we're not doing this in a proper manner. We need to knock off what we're doing and disassemble. And if we want to address this, we have the right way to do this. We can call the magistrates, we can call together the court, then we can assemble and come together and address this in a proper manner, right? So we see that happening with believers in the New Testament. And it's not because they're trying to say we're going to be political. It's because they're living out their faith, and that faith impacts every area of their life. And when they see things that don't align with a biblical worldview, a biblical way of living your life, they speak to it. And sometimes that becomes political speech, right? But over the last 100 years, these progressives have come along and they've said, you can't talk to political things. Well, they're moral issues, most of them, right? They're ethical issues. Well, who better to speak to that than those who have God's word, those who are studying God's word?
I think, too, that if there's an area in our lives as a Christian that we're not putting Christ first, we can't really call ourselves Christians. We're supposed to, he's supposed to inform everything we do. We're supposed to forsake all else and only focus on Christ. And you don't get to separate your faith from
Your political beliefs.
you don't
Yeah.
you can't call yourself a Christian if you believe that.
Yeah, and this is a little bit of a cliche, right? But it's a very true one. Sometimes cliches are just that either Jesus is Lord of all, or he is not Lord at all.
Amen.
Because we're called to surrender our life to him, to give up everything, right? We see that throughout the Gospels when Jesus is teaching. Right? There's the account where his family, his mother and his brothers come to him and they're like, you're going crazy, Jesus. And they're on the outskirts of this crowd. And the people around Jesus say, hey, your family is outside the door trying to get in here. They want to see you. You guys know what his response was? His response was to say, wait, who is my mother and my brothers and my sisters? Those who hear my word and do it, right? So he's not saying neglect your family, but what he's saying is you have to be willing to give up everything. You have to be willing to say, if my family denies God, I will not deny God. I will stay with what God says. I'm not going to give up anything else. I'm going to try to convince my family. I'm going to try to convince my friends. This is the truth, and we must follow the truth. But I'm not going to follow them down a path that is leading away from godly things.
So this kind of informed TPUSA starting, and then what year did you get involved again?
So with Turning Point USA Faith, we started that in September of 2023.
Okay, 2023. Okay.
Yeah.
So you formed TPUSA.
So this kind of can lead us right into the situation at hand, because we have not only a duty, but we also have a right to be involved in local affairs. So how did you find out? Let's kind of give everybody a background bit of knowledge here on what the Ozark School District has been up to.
Okay.
regarding the vacancies with the school board.
Yeah. So I'll go back just a little bit. So we moved to Ozark in August of 2021.
Okay.
And of course, we move into the community. Now, we've been residents of Southwest Missouri pretty much our whole life. But we moved to Ozark. We start looking, okay, what's going on in the community? What's the school board doing? What's the city council doing? You know, these people who actually affect our lives on a local basis, what's the county commissioners doing? So I start listening to the meetings, you know, attending meetings when I can, pulling up their videos, right? The library board, all these different things that have significant impact into our daily life. Here recently, now we knew there'd been rumors of there was going to be one of the school board members resigning. Didn't know exactly when it was going to happen. That member had been reported that they were moving.
They had reported this is Guy Calloway, right?
Guy Calloway. There was reports that he was moving. And this is kind of in the community, especially those who are active in the community. They've heard this is going on. Now, confirming when and where, I didn't have any confirmation of that until that Ozark school board meeting in December. And that's when they actually gave the confirmation.
December of 2024.
Yes.
December 2024.
Well, and the very interested. There were already 2 vacancies that had come up, and they had advertised for the 2 vacancies. People could apply to run as a candidate for those 2. But the third one, Guy Calloway, who moved away to Florida.
Yep.
And I know for a fact that for many months there were rumors that he was leaving.
Yep.
And I heard that from a board member.
Yep.
So they've known.
There was knowledge.
Yes.
Who had knowledge and when they had knowledge is still, I haven't been able to confirm any of that.
Right. But anyway.
I checked on it.
Yeah.
And just as a technicality here, like we got to make sure we use the correct verbiage. Words matter, right?
Right.
So vacancies are when there is no one in a seat.
That's right.
There is end of term where those positions are up for election again.
Okay.
So we had 2 where they were coming to the end of their terms.
Okay.
So we had 2 members who were serving out the end of their term. One of those members had not declared a candidacy. So we knew that there was one that was going to be filled by a new person. Now, it isn't vacant because that is
Person is
Jenkins.
still.
That's Mark Jenkins as the school board president. He is still in that position until April when there is a new person who will be elected to fill the new term, right? And a vacancy, though, is when someone resigns from their position or they are no longer qualified to hold that position.
Right? That's an important point.
Yeah, there are specific qualifications to be able to hold a position, right?
Yeah.
And those are listed statutorily. So you can go to the Missouri Revised Statutes and you can look and see what are the qualifications to be a member in an elected position. And all of these type of board positions, whether it's school board or library board or county commission or these various different positions, you have to be a resident taxpayer of the district where you're going to be elected, right?
Yes.
That means that you have an address where you reside in that place, right? Not just a work address, because look, that would open up all kinds of things, right? It was, I've got an address there, but is it your residence? Is it where you reside? And I think that's part of what is at play here, because I've had people tell me, and actually I think it may have been in the email that I received. I have to go back and confirm that. But I've had people tell me that he had, Guy Calloway had a work address still here in the area.
But that doesn't matter
by you
No.
as a resident taxpayer.
He never used that address for anything Ozark School that we know of.
Well, and I haven't researched that to look and see. I do know that at the time he resigned, which was his resignation was tendered December 19th, he did not reside in the district, had no property where he was residing in the district. For someone to establish when that residency left, right? So it would be, hey, did you do a change of address and your mail's going to a different place? That would be some of the things someone would have to look into and see.
Right.
But that resignation that he tendered on December 19th, as explained in the email that was sent to me, and I'll get back to where that email is from in a minute.
Present?
Yeah, that's what I was just going to meet.
He was severed at the meeting.
So he phoned in?
He sent the resignation, and I don't know if it was hand delivered or if it was emailed, how it was done,
Okay.
but they had a written written resignation on December 19th that was effective December 31st.
Okay.
However, when you
So it was read at the meeting.
it was read at the meeting, and they said this will be effective December 31st.
Okay.
However, if you're no longer qualified to fill the position,
Yeah.
you're actually not qualified to fill the seat the moment that you leave, right? Now, when you tender your resignation, that's a notification that you're giving. But to qualify to hold the position, you actually still have to hold those qualifications. So that's a question I'm trying to get answered.
Yeah.
Right.
Now,
When entity versus qualification.
yeah,
to hold the
anywhere between July and September, I heard that his house was sold.
Yeah, and I've heard some of those rumors, but
There's so
I see
much
those as
preparation that goes into a long distance move, as we all know, that for him, I mean, the average person would be tidying up those loose ends months, weeks in advance to the actual moving trucks arriving.
Yeah.
So the fact that he didn't, I mean, to me, I would hypothesize that it's very intentional, but
Well, and looking at someone's intent is very difficult.
it is.
That's a conversation to have directly with an individual to find out. But there are duties and responsibilities that people have as a member. Let's do a hypothetical, right? If I'm a person in a board position, I have a duty and responsibility to uphold the laws that apply to that position,
Yes.
right? And one
It's
of the
moral and ethical.
Yes.
And the people that voted you.
and legal, because there are legal responsibilities that go with those positions. And if you don't fulfill those legal responsibilities, there are consequences that can be enacted to go along with that, right? And including for school boards, right? There's part of the school board statutes that actually lays out what the legal violation is if you're either avoiding duties or neglecting duties. Willfully neglecting duties, right? That's the legal term that's in there, is willful neglect. In other words, you knew it was there, but you're overlooking it,
Okay.
right? That would be an instance of willful neglect. So you have to establish intent, but that's in a legal setting, right? That would be, I'm going to file a lawsuit and I'm going to try to figure that out.
Right.
But if I, as a sitting member on a board, an elected position, and an appointed position, the people have vested that person with power. If that's me sitting there, I have a vested authority, and that authority comes from the people who voted either for me directly or let's say something. So we have some commissions in the county that are appointed commissions. There's road districts, there's planning and zoning commissions, there's library boards. These are all appointed positions, and their authority is a delegated authority from the elected officials who have appointed them.
That's right. Who have the appointing authority.
But when we understand that all authority is derived from the people, from the voters, we're lending our authority to those people, then we have a right and responsibility as citizens to hold them accountable for those things. Just like if I'm actually a member serving on a board, I have a right and a duty and a responsibility to be accountable for my actions and be accountable for all of the things that go along with those positions. So
Were you at that December 19th?
I was not.
Okay.
I did watch the meeting afterwards. Wasn't unable to attend. I had a tooth extracted that day.
No, they're long meetings. They're very long. I went to one that was about 3 hours and it cured me
Yeah.
for going for a long time.
Attending a meeting after having a molar extracted probably is not the best.
However, attending the meetings does feel similar to
Extracted.
very similar.
So, okay, so we've established that we don't know exactly when he moved and became ineligible,
Right.
but it looks like there was some dragging of the feet.
Well, it was clearly prior to December 9th.
Yes, it was very much, because we do have screenshots
Yeah.
of where he had established his business in Florida.
Yep.
Gulf Breeze, Florida. So he was gone at some point. I'm sure with a little sleuthing we could figure out exactly when he left, but we don't know that. We just know that most likely he was gone for a period of time before he put in his resignation. Therefore, there is a case to be made that that position should have become a vacancy at that point.
At that point in time.
Yes,
The
and he
vacancy-
should have resigned once he knew that he was no longer living within the Ozark School
Yeah.
District.
And I'll say this, by my reading of the statutes, right, that vacancy is effective when you are no longer qualified to hold the position, right? Now, establishing that in a court of law, right, which is what you would have to do, could be very difficult because now you're trying to determine, okay, when exactly did this happen? What ruling are we going to get? Am I going to be able to make a stronger argument than the person who's making the other argument? So there's a lot of facts that come into play there. However, what we're actually looking at is from an ethical and a moral standpoint.
Right.
I mean,
If you're putting your house up for sale, you could have just
Yeah.
told people.
And
I don't know.
the legal definition doesn't change. Now, how it's ruled on in court, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that definition of resident taxpayer, that's established. And at the moment that changes is the moment when you are no longer authorized to hold that position because that authority that has been given to you is no longer in effect, right? And that is the argument that I would make, is that the authority that he wielded is no longer in effect when he is no longer qualified to hold the position. Now,
So you emailed the board
Yep.
on January 12th, it looks like,
Yes.
right? And so you laid out basically some questions for them.
Yep.
Can you describe what you were, I mean, you're
Yeah,
basically,
so my intent with that was I had done a little bit of research in the statutes that give the guidance on how a vacancy should be handled. Because I had, back up just a hair, I was asked by a board member to put my hat in the ring for the appointment, right? And I had told that person I would consider it. And they had sent me the link to do the application. Well, I looked at the posting, right? And the explanation that was given on the posting seemed a little weird. And so that's when I started doing some investigation. I'm like, okay, let me take some time and look at the statutes, because they didn't reference any statutes. They just said, by Missouri law, this is what we're going to do. Well, it's usually smart when you're going to reference hey, by Missouri law,
to list it.
to list what the statute is
Yes.
that you are actually trying to
Admit.
remain constant with, right? Hey, I want to make sure that we're not enforcing law, but we're abiding by law, right? I want to make sure I'm abiding by what the law says we're supposed to do.
So when you sent that email, it was your intent because you knew that there would be 2 end of term
Yep.
positions,
Yep.
at least one if the other incumbent wasn't. Okay, so
Well,
that's what you were inquiring about.
So I was inquiring about why this now vacant position was not being included on the election ballot for April of 2025.
Okay, so you'd already heard that guy had.
Yeah, so I had already watched. I'd seen the school board meeting
Okay.
before this happened, right? I watched that just a few days after the board meeting actually happened. When I was feeling a little bit better with my tooth being gone. Right, I went back and I pulled it up and I watched that meeting.
Okay.
So I had seen that. Yep, that happened. This is what's going on.
That was a bit of a contentious meeting there because it seemed to me as if the board in general was on the defensive there. I know that there had been some articles published, kind of questioning the process.
Yeah.
And so they seemed a bit defensive at the time. And they have a board lawyer
Yeah.
out of St. Louis, by the way, who's associated with the Missouri School Boards Association. I don't know if she's a preferred lawyer for them or whatever, but I do know she's been a speaker at their annual meetings and things like that. Her name is Celinda Brasher.
Yes.
And she's the one who is counseling the board to continue down this road of appointment rather than doing an election in April.
Yes. And
Okay.
my understanding, so I had a couple of responses that came back to me. So I've had a little bit of a back and forth in this email exchange where I was citing the statutes and asking for clarification. and asking for the board members to ensure they are following their duties and their responsibilities, right? Very specifically using those terms, because a lot of times as citizens, we forget that we also have duties and responsibilities, right?
That's right.
And these are volunteer positions, right? And it's a tough job. If you take that job, it's a tough job. It's a time commitment. And
Well, and you're dealing with a $90 million budget.
over 100.
Oh, it's over 100.
It's over $100 million budget.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of
Deal.
a lot of weight that comes with that, right? And that's the lives and the livelihood of the children of the community, right? So when we think about that, hey, you are responsible. By statute, you are a director. This is a board of directors. We frequently say school board members, but the statutes list this as directors whose responsibility is to I'm not trying to remember the exact terminology, but it's not just to give guidance, right?
It's to govern.
It's to yes, and that's the term is to govern and guide the operations and everything that goes on in that school district. Now, frequently that authority is delegated to other people in that school district, but you can't give up the responsibility. You may delegate some authority to have actions happen, but ultimately, as a director on this board of directors, you hold the responsibility for everything that goes on. So that is a heavy weight that should be considered by anybody who's looking at doing that. This just isn't just having a say on what may happen. This is holding a duty and a responsibility to ensure that it does happen in the way that is appropriate, right? That is right, that is moral, that is ethical, that is legal. And those are all considerations to have. So I was trying to find, I've got a statutory reference that I was trying to look up that comes back to why this vacancy is an issue, to say that we're only going to appoint someone, because that's really the response that has come back, is that per the state law, they have the authority to appoint someone. And I completely agree. They have the authority to appoint someone. But that exact statute that gives guidance on how to make the appointment, the very last sentence in that section of the statute says that appointment is until the next municipal election, right? And so
You mean Guy took so long to resign that it enabled the board to then try and appoint somebody through his unexpired term? Is that what they're attempting?
Well, that's the way that they are.
They're reading the
interpreting
law.
the law,
Yeah.
and this is the guidance, and it very much it appears, right? I don't have.
Can I just to interject?
Yeah.
When was his expired term? When was the end of his term?
2026.
April of 2026.
Okay,
So that's
so he would have had a little over a year left at the time.
year and a half.
Yeah, year.
Right? So even when he resigned, there was a year and 5 months left on that term.
Okay. And so if he had resigned when he moved, say,
Anyway,
Even-
between people are conjecturing it was between July and September.
Okay.
And it was several.
they would have then put it up with the other two seats.
So that would have
on
been nearly
re-election.
2 years.
Yes,
Right.
yes, and so what would have happened? They could have appointed someone until this
Until this
election.
election.
No,
in
if that
April.
so this say they appoint someone, have they started that process yet?
They started the process.
Okay, so this appointed person, will they serve the rest of Guy Calloway's term?
That's what they're attempting to do instead of
Now,
until the next election.
if it was put for the election, would that person start a new term, or would they just be elected until Guy Calloway
Yeah, and that's what the
to the end of his original term?
verbiage of that. So this is state statute 162.261, and this is at the end of subsection 1, because subsection 1 gives guidance on when vacancies occur. Any vacancy occurring in the board shall be filled by the remaining members of the board, except that if there are 2 vacancies. And then there's a whole section on what happens if there's 2 vacancies. But we're dealing with 1 vacancy.
Yeah.
And this is why the words are important, right? So there's only 1 vacancy, because the other 2 seats that are up for election are not vacant. They're just at the end of their term.
Okay.
So then when you get past the 2 vacancy section, It says, the person appointed shall hold office until the next municipal election, when a director shall be elected for the unexpired term. Right? That seems very clear to say that on the next municipal election. Now, I think what is being argued against is that they missed the filing period. So therefore, it can't go on the election because they missed a filing period. But
When was the filing period?
well, and that's when you read those
17.
election statutes, and I went back and referenced all those, and those are in the email that I sent, right?
Yes.
Those election statutes are referencing normal terms as those are approached. They're not referencing vacancies. Because there are election statutes that deal with vacancies that appear on boards, right? And so there are late notifications that can be done to get something added. So there are different timelines that could apply. And that's what I was asking. Why do these other statutes that appear to give a different timeline than the 17 Tuesdays prior to and the 14 Tuesdays prior to, because that's the timeline that's referenced in the email. That's what the argument has been is, well, we missed the filing deadline, so nobody can be a candidate for the next election.
I'm sorry, this is just the cynical person in me, but it seems as if this was done on purpose so that the board could appoint who they wanted rather than allow the voters to have their say in who they elect to
Will
the school.
Will the current board, including the 2 positions that will be up for re-election, be appointing the new seat?
So the current board, yes.
The
So
director, I should say.
The 6 members who are currently sitting in the positions will be the ones who will appoint that new director, right? So there is an appearance, right? And this is, I've had a email conversation with Mark Jenkins, the board president.
And he's not running for re-election.
He's not running
So
for
he'll be
re-election.
off in April.
So why should he be choosing who's appointed as?
Well, because that's his duty and responsibility by the statute. Is there is a vacancy that occurs, and that vacancy means that now there is a representative of the people who is missing, right? And if we go back to first principles on things, those people are authorized to have a representative and have a voice, right? And this is why the statutes that apply to the elections give all kinds of guidance for various different types of elected positions and how those will be filled if they're vacated, right? Some of them have to wait some elected positions have to wait for an election. Some can be filled by the governor, right? Some can be filled by other authorities. The county commission has a role in appointing positions, even elected positions. Because that piece of the statute that I skipped a while ago where it talks about more than 2 or more vacancies, the county commission then comes into play and they appoint those positions, right? So there is various different ways that are given by statutory guidance on how this will happen. But the principle at play is that people deserve to have a voice in the governance of what is going on.
So
right?
currently the board is using the statutes for an end of term procedure rather than a vacancy.
Yes, that's the way I read that. And I've asked a couple of lawyers to say, I'm being told that this specifically applies, and they're saying no, an election can be held to fill that vacancy in a different way. There are different ways of doing that you don't have to abide by those guidelines. Now, again, this is there's the old axiom that is, if you get 10 lawyers in a room, you'll get 10 different answers on the one topic that you're talking about, right? And so this is the opinion of one lawyer versus the opinion of the school board lawyer. And the school board is acting on the opinion of the lawyer. And I've had conversation with other elected officials, right? This is what happens frequently, though, is that people say the lawyer told us, so that's what we have to do. And they forget that the lawyers do not hold the authority. The lawyers are rendering an opinion on how they view the statutes, the laws at play, because those lawyers spend they went to school to learn how to read laws, right? They spend their days reading laws and interpreting laws, but they're not the ones who have the authority to execute the law, right? That's those elected officials who are sitting in the position.
So, all right. So you're basically saying the school board, which by the way, they what the lawyer says is scripture to them.
Frequently, yes.
Yes, I've noticed that with lawyers on other boards too. If you have an activist lawyer, if you have a progressive / socialist lawyer, you're going to get an opinion and counsel that can run very counter to the people's will
Yes.
and what is good for the people.
Yeah.
I think we're seeing that in this situation, and it's very, very disappointing that some of the other board members have not stepped up, especially ones who have former military backgrounds.
Yeah.
Very, very disappointing.
Well, and this is why understanding duty and responsibility and authority are very
Yes.
important, right? Understanding what those things mean and how those should guide your actions, because you're taking advice, and you should get as much advice as possible when you're serving those positions. When I was in the military, right, I had a nearly 26-year military career, and that was active duty and guard and reserve and 3 combat deployments. And I was a medic serving in support positions. I was a first sergeant. I finished my career as a squadron superintendent, as a chief master sergeant. And those are frequently those first sergeant positions and those superintendent positions. There's authority that comes with that, but we're wielding the authority of the commander. So we are frequently the advisor, and as the superintendent, I was the senior enlisted advisor to my commander. We had almost 80 people in our unit, and we're trying to make sure that my commission, if you will, what I'm as a superintendent of a squadron, what you are told that you have to do by the UCMJ is that you ensure the readiness, the morale, and the welfare of all those people underneath of you. And that term readiness, to military people, they hear that and they go, oh, but that is everything that has to do with how you are ready to go fight a war, right? Whatever your role is in executing the mission of the military, you are that superintendent, that commander. Their entire job is to make sure that you are prepared, that if America calls on you to go serve, that you know what you're doing and you're ready to go. Bring that back to our civic duties and responsibilities. When we are serving in these positions, the electorate, the voters have vested an authority and a responsibility in you to say, you will do these things. And so there's a huge amount of trust that comes with that. So if you're in one of those positions of authority, who you trust to give you advice is a really, really big deal, right? So if I have a lawyer
That's a great point.
who is only giving me one perspective on something and doesn't lay out, well, it could be this way, and it could be this way, and it could be this way, and here's the different four different perspectives this could be looked at, then they're probably not giving you great advice. If they're not giving you at least one countering position to the position they're taking, right,
Yeah.
then you're not getting great advice, because how are you able to make an informed decision? As the person wielding the authority, you have to be able to make an informed decision about what's going to happen. And as a volunteer member on a planning and zoning commission or a school board or a library board or whatever that may be, you're putting a lot of trust in other people, because frequently you don't have the time, right? There's a limited amount of time for you to do these things, but you're still going to be held responsible for those decisions that you make and those actions that you take. So you have to have a huge amount of trust in the people that are giving you advice.
That's right. That's right.
And I fear for our local school board that they're not getting great advice.
I absolutely agree with that. Why don't they have a local lawyer? Number one, why do they have a lawyer out of St. Louis at a big, law firm who's associated with
what's
some very
great
progressive?
I will tell you,
lawyer?
over $100 million budget. That's why.
Yeah. But
That's all you need.
Does that say that there are no lawyers in Springfield? There are no lawyers in Ozark? There are no lawyers in this area who are able and capable to handle that? Why do we go to this other law firm? And it may be that there are organizations that they are trusting,
Yeah.
right? Missouri School Board Association or some other school board association or some other, educational association.
Well, this
that
goes back
says-
to local control, too,
Yes,
doesn't
it
it?
does.
Because you're dealing with kind of state level and then even higher above law firms that deal in state and national type of things. And often you're getting a very progressive viewpoint counsel from these types of groups and lawyers, and it takes away local control, which, as you can see, this is just an example of, because it's the board appointing, it is not the citizens allowed to vote for who they want.
Well, and this is why sometimes you want advice from people in your local area, because they got skin in the game, right? If I've got a lawyer who lives in my district, or a lawyer who lives in a neighboring district, who knows that what happens in that district is going to affect them as well, that's going to affect how they view what's going on, right? Because you're going, oh, if I give this advice, this is what could potentially happen. So I should give the best advice I can and give as many different perspectives as I can on this as well, right? Now, you may have a recommended course of action. To go back to my military career, right? I would usually build 3 COAs, courses of action, for those who are seeking my advice. And I'm going to lay out the 3 courses of action. And then I'm going to say, this is my recommended course of action, but I'm giving you options, right? And here's the reasons why I think this is the best one, but here's some others to look at. And frequently our governing bodies are not doing that. They're not getting, okay, is there more than one way to skin this cat? Is there more than one way to look at this thing? And if I'm going to be held responsible and accountable, what is the responsibility that I may be impinging on, right? What did I not execute on? What duty did I not uphold? And if the statute is being interpreted to say the next election is not actually the next election, I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and we referenced the movie Mom's Night Out. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Mom's Night Out. It's a kind of a Christian-based film, but it's hilarious. It's a comedy, it's not really a rom-com. It's really just kind of a straight comedy. But there's a scene in there where these 3 ladies are going out for their mom's night out. They're going to a nice restaurant. And the mom who'd set up the appointment goes to the maitre d', goes to the desk, says, hey, we have an appointment for such and such time tonight. Maitre d' looks at him and goes, no, you're not on the list. He goes, no, I called on Monday and I said, I will be coming on the next Thursday. This is the next Thursday. And the maitre d' goes, no, that's this Thursday. Next Thursday is the following week. She goes, no, the next would be the next one that occurs. In what world is next not the next one that occurs? Right? And I think that's what's going on here. They're looking at this and they're saying next is not the next one that occurs. Next is the next one that we tell you that it is.
So what can we do? I mean, are they going to just choose a new or appoint? And
I think it's very interesting. The board president did mention that they're quote unquote just obeying the law. But he said, however, quote, I'm quoting, it is also making an effort to include interested individuals in the process. The law requires the board to appoint a replacement, but the law neither prohibits nor requires an application process.
And this is true.
And so they're trying to compromise a little bit.
Yeah.
By allowing people to go through an application process to be appointed. However, that still doesn't give the people.
Yeah. Which that's appreciated, right? It's nice that you would say,
it's all right.
Well, and I'm saying it's nice that you would say, hey, we're going to open up a period of time where people can put their hat in the ring and then we'll sort through the hat, right? Because that's kind of what this is. But the problem is that what the law is actually giving guidance on?
Yeah.
Because the law says, like you said, the law says they're allowed to appoint. They could have just went and said, well, we know Jack Smith, and Jack Smith is going to be the next school board member until the next election. And then it'll be on the election and we'll get somebody in, right?
Yeah.
But their interpretation of the next municipal election is a little wonky here.
Board's night out.
Yeah, it's the board's night out. It's not the next one. It's the one following. No, and I just don't understand.
So what can we do? You could apply? Is that what you're saying? Like,
Well, somebody who lives within
Somebody
the
who lives in
district.
Ozark School District
Right.
can apply.
okay.
And I've had a lot of people talking to me, and my intent is to submit an application. So I'll say that here. That I've had a couple of people I've told that. My intent is to submit an application. I would not expect to be selected. And this is not to try to say, hey, this is a power play for Brian Rohlman. He wants to be on the board. No, but if I'm going to make a stink about something, I should be willing to put my neck on the line
Yeah.
and say I'm willing to take that responsibility if necessary, right?
Right.
But my intent also is to, that's my dog barking. If we got that on the audio,
Sorry.
she found somebody outside.
That's okay.
But my intent also is to try to get this on the April 2025 ballot, if at all possible.
Okay.
And I'm seeking, advice on that from people who have law degrees.
Yeah.
I do not have a law degree. I can read the law, and plain reading is usually what you should try to go with, right?
Yeah.
Especially to go back to my Patriot Academy stuff, right? This is how we have a strong republic, is that we have citizens who read our laws, who understand English, right? I can read it and say, well, that doesn't make sense. So if they're going to enact a law that doesn't make sense, we should have a voice in that. If they're going to enact a policy at a local level and it doesn't make sense, we should be able to read that and not have somebody say, well, you're not a lawyer, you don't understand.
Which is very common. There's an appeal to authority
Yeah.
all the time with legal counsel. And I think a lot of times it's unwarranted, this appeal to authority. I've seen it over and over.
So, and you see that a little bit, and I did give you a copy of that email. So you see that a little bit in in the last response that I received, where they'll I'm assuming this is from the lawyer because the way it's written looks like it came from the lawyer. But there's a reference to lex specialis, right, which is the legal doctrine that the most specific law applies in any given realm. And so, as I had referenced the election laws, and this is a response to the election laws, they're saying, well, the election laws don't apply because of lex specialis. So only the school board laws apply. The problem with that is the timeline they are referencing comes directly from the election statutes. So now you've just told me that you can only use the school board statutes to give guidance on what your actions are, but you're actually using an election statute to establish this 17 Tuesdays prior to
That's right.
as your timeline. That's an election statute. That's nowhere in the school board statute.
Yes. Yes. So they're mixing and matching in order to get the outcome that they want, which is to be able to appoint. So it's been kind of a comedy of errors, if you want to say, from the moment Guy Calloway did not resign when he should have, or vacated the position when he should have, and then the board not following up to do the right thing and make sure that an election happens in April instead of an appointment.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's problematic. It's very problematic. It speaks to an issue with the board. Actually, they're digging their heels in based on questionable legal advice. Really. Yeah.
And I think we have board members that want to do the right thing.
Yes,
right?
there are
board members that want to do the right thing. But when you place your trust in someone who is not giving you what you should receive, no matter what your intent is, it can be misdirected, right?
Indeed.
And if there are those who are not looking for the best, then it's much more easily manipulated when that happens, right? And so that's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm asking for from the board members, is just question a little bit of what you're being told. And, I'm reaching out to the other authorities that should be at play at this, because, when you look at who governs elections, right? That's our county clerks. They're the local election authority. That's the Secretary of State. That's the state election authority. And I've sent messages to both of those. My responses to those have been less than helpful.
They don't like getting involved on the local level, I don't think.
Well,
but-
and our county clerk has said that this is only a school board matter, and the school board is the one who's going to
Now,
give them the guidance on
Were
this.
are you talking about the Secretary of State as far as Ashcroft or Denny Hoskins?
So Denny Hoskins is now
Yes, and you had
and say when I sent that was I think on January 13th, 12th or 13th.
okay, so
I
he had
sent
just
those-
come into office.
I sent those all within a 12 to 14 hour time period when I sent the emails to these different offices. But the reply that I got was from their elections division at the Secretary of State. So there's not a name on it. It's just coming from an email that is elections at Secretary of State.
Okay.
So they're the ones who are giving guidance. And at the state level, right, their answer was, we only deal in matters that have to do with election statutes. Got it. Okay, well, that makes sense. And that is where your authority exists, is in the election statutes. And I questioned why the certain election statutes that I was looking at didn't apply in this matter. And they had said they could, but more than likely not, because the board is appointing someone. So my guess is they didn't look at it very in depth. They just did a cursory look at it and said, well, there's an appointment process going on, so we're not going to speak to it because that doesn't sound like an election to us.
Okay.
So this is important because it's our kids and it's
Yeah.
$100 million worth of taxpayer money.
Yeah.
These are who's deciding.
So you're going to apply to be appointed. Do you know of other people who are interested, or do you know of anyone else that's been tapped?
I do not.
Yeah.
I'm assuming there's probably a number of people who are putting in for the appointment because if you're looking at it from a holistic perspective, you're like, hey, I want to be on the school board. How do I get on the school board? Well, the first is you have to campaign, right? You have to file as a candidate. You have to go through a campaign process. You have to get a committee. You have to get all these things. That can be very taxing, right? Or if you were like, hey, I really wanted to serve on the school board, if you're a person who says that, and I don't have to campaign, I don't have to file a committee, I have to do all these things, I can just fill out an application and turn it in, from the human nature perspective, saying I'm going to take the path of least resistance, that second option sounds really good to somebody. So I'm suspecting there are probably a number of people who will put applications in.
Yeah.
Again, I'm putting mine in with the hopes that the responses that I put on my application are read.
Well, the Ozark School District is a hard nut to crack.
Yeah.
They're very tight, and they are very, very focused on the organizations that kind of train and counsel and run how they operate. And it's often not a local thing.
Yeah.
It's often very political and on a state level, unfortunately. So it's a tough nut to crack. It's got a huge budget.
Yep.
But when Christina Tonsing was elected, that was the first crack. And so there's been a couple other elections that have turned out rather disappointing, but I think there's some opportunity here. And so hopefully, a minor miracle will happen and you will get appointed, because I think you'd be great on the board.
For sure.
How can people get a hold of you?
So probably the best way to get a hold of me is via email. And this is my Patriot Academy email. It's Coach Mentor Rohlman, and Rohlman is ROHLMAN at ilovejesus.com.
Nice.
So Coach Mentor Rohlman at ilovejesus.com. That's the best way to send me a message, to reach out to me and get a hold of me.
How can they get a hold of the board, just in case they wanted to send a
So you
little
go to
note?
Ozark School District's website, and at the header there is a drop down for the board,
Okay.
and all of their emails are listed on their website. So you just go to their board; it has their picture, and their email is right there by their picture. So you can select that, which is what I did when I sent my emails to them. I went to
Yes.
that website, copied the emails, put them all on the email that I sent. As we kind of wind down, one thing that we can look at, there was a change in 2022 to the Missouri school board laws. that as I was researching this, I came across it, and I actually reached out to Mike Moon, and he gave me a little background on it a little bit. Our Senator Mike Moon. This school board statute that changed, which I believe is 162.563, I'll confirm that here in a few minutes, allows school districts to be redistricted.
Redistricted.
So it allows for, I think the verbiage says, a subdivision of school districts into 7 equal districts or any number of geographical districts and districts at large, right? So that's the intent behind the law.
Right, and that's sort of like what is with the Christian County Library. Yeah, there's
County
5
Commission.
districts. There's 5 districts
Yep.
and 5 members, so that would be the same, and that would
And then the
make
geographic.
those elected officials more answerable and accountable to their constituents.
Yes, because each person who lives in that area, right? And it would be broken up. The statute very clearly says that it would be by the population, right? So it wouldn't be one big geographic area that has almost nobody and then a spot that has lots of people. It's just like the ambulance districts and the fire boards. They're split up by the number of people that they are representing.
They're not going to like that, though, Brian.
But what that allows, right? And from an electorate standpoint, from a citizen engagement standpoint, that allows you to have a person who is your representative that you can go to, right? I get that other people would be, well, why would we change from what we have? They can live anywhere in the district. They can, but who is your representative that you go to talk to on that board?
That's right. Nobody.
Nobody.
You don't.
Everybody.
Everybody.
But nobody, right? Because anytime somebody says everybody's responsible, that means nobody's responsible.
Well, and also what you can do then is you can develop more of a rapport with them.
Yes.
You can give them information that may counter what they're being
Yes.
pushed into, or and it definitely gives more power to the tax-paying voter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because those.
So how would
citizens
that
that
come
area.
about?
So the statute gives guidance on that, and without getting too detailed, there's 2 processes. One is the school district itself. The board itself says, hey, we want to split up and have representative districts. The other one is a petition process, and it's outlined in the statute what it has to go through to have the petition process happen. But that's something that I think the voters, the citizens of the school districts, not just the Ozark School District, I think all of the school districts around should look at that and say, is this something that would be beneficial to us? Because it's how most of our Republican, and when I say Republican, small republic, like the American Republic that our Constitution says that we are, and that the state constitutions outline this as a Republican form of government where there are representatives. Not everybody goes to, Jefferson City. We don't all assemble into the legislative halls and cast a vote. We elect a representative to go and hold our authority and wield our voice for us. And almost every form of where we see that, it is an individual being elected to represent the people in an area.
Yes.
Except for school boards, where we have 7 individuals who are representing everyone in a certain area. And, if we're going to follow those founding principles of a constitutional republic, it would be much more effective to say, Christina Tunsing is my representative, right?
Right.
I can
District
go
2 or whatever. Yeah.
for whoever that is. And then that also, you couldn't have everyone living on the same street serving.
That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say it could
Right.
be, everybody in a certain gated community, and then they all got school board, and they're gonna make choices that work for them.
Which is the potential that happens with the way they are currently organized, right? Is that you could have everybody in one neighborhood who runs the school board.
That's right. That's right.
This
That's a great idea.
That is fantastic.
All right. Do you have someone to spearhead that, or is this just?
do not yet. I'm talking to a couple of different groups. Ozark School Support Team, I think, is a great group. They have been working very diligently, very hard for many years, trying to educate people on what's going on. Doing a lot of research to say, hey, this is where the budget's at, and this is where the money's being spent. But when we're looking at trying to engage people, I think any grassroots group, anybody who's interested in what's going on with their school district, right?
Yes.
Parents I'm betting a lot of parents would be like, I would love it if I had one person that I could just go talk to when I want to talk to them.
If you could crack Ozark, I bet some of the other local districts around here would crack sooner and easier. You know what I mean? I think it would cause kind of a movement around here that would be very beneficial to the children, the parents, and the taxpayer.
Yeah. So a lot of that, it's first principles. It's what are the principles that are at play, and how do we make sure those get enacted?
Right.
That's really my intent with everything that I'm working on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Excellent.
Well, thank you so much, Brian, for taking the time to talk to us. It's very
Thank
helpful.
you for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, yeah, thanks for letting us invade your kitchen for now. So it's coachmentorrohlman at ilovejesus.com. All right.
All right.
Thanks, guys.